Expedition 33 presents one of the most debated, gut-wrenching choices in video game storytelling. A moment where the fate of an entire world rests in your hands. Most players walk away believing they've witnessed a beautiful, tragic dilemma about saving a dying world. We grieve for Mael's, now Alicia, and her tragic happy ending, and elevated Painted Verso's sacrifice to the status of tragic heroism. But in doing so, we miss the real truth. The game pulls off a narrative sleight of hand, directing our empathy to the wrong characters and leaving the one soul in true, unending torment unseen. My name is Vigil, and this is Video Game Lore. Today, we're going deeper than ever before, into the life of the real-world Verso Dessendre. We'll trace his journey, the creation of every layer of his canvas, the tragedy of his death, and the relentless suffering of the fragment of his soul left behind, the child forced to paint endlessly for the sake of others' delusions. This is not the story of Painted Verso's choice. This is the story of Verso Dessendre, and why his is the only choice that truly matters. Let's begin. Verso Dessendre was born in Paris, France on February 22, 1879, to Eileen and Renoir Dessendre. He arrived 2 years after his older sister, Clea, and from the earliest days, their parents harbored high hopes for both children, to carry on the Dessendre legacy as renowned painters, heirs to a tradition of artistry and chroma. In childhood, Verso's heart belonged not to the canvas, but to the world beyond it. He fell in love with trains, spending endless hours in his room building elaborate track sets, beaming with joy as he called out, "Choo-choo!" and sent his toy engines racing along the rails. He cherished every moment outside with the family dog Monoko, running through fields and woods, or hiking with his father Renoir, learning to see the beauty of the world through a wanderer's eyes. While Aline dedicated herself to training both Verso and Clea in the mastery of chroma and the skills of painting, Verso's happiest moments were found away from the canvas. The family often ventured into the city, but nothing delighted Verso more than the arrival of the Fête Foraines, the carnivals that swept through Paris in a blaze of lights, color, and sound. The rides, the sweets, the thrill of winning plush toys, all were sources of joy, but it was the spectacle of the wrestlers that captivated him most. Verso cheered for the heroes, but he was just as enchanted by the villainous performers, who transformed every match into a theatrical event, boasting and taunting with larger-than-life personalities. Among the trinkets and prizes, one companion was consistent, a puffy plush named Esquier, perhaps one at the carnival itself, who quickly became Verso's silent guardian, a source of comfort and reassurance in every moment of uncertainty. But beneath the surface, Paris was changing. Tensions simmered in the city as the rift between riders and painters grew sharper, a conflict that began to shape Verso's earliest memories around the age of 7 or 8. Though the game is silent on precise details, the real-world events of the 1890s offer fertile ground for speculation. In those years, famed writers published scathing, fictionalized accounts of avant-garde painters, sowing discord within artistic circles, and even fractioning relationships within the Painters' Council, including Eileen herself. The conflict reached its peak when the writers, poets, and academics united to publish a manifesto in the newspapers, condemning the Eiffel Tower as a useless and monstrous symbol of the new modern age, a source of inspiration for many contemporary visual artists. The crisis split Paris's artistic community apart. Lifelong friendships ended, some painters refused to employ models suspected of literary sympathies, and the press became a battlefield where every canvas and every novel was a weapon in the fight for France's future. Painters dedicated vast, daring works to the realities of Parisian life, often focusing on the city's seedier, lower-class corners. Literacy critics denounced these works, accusing the artists of glorifying decay, moral bankruptcy, and artifice. Through it all, Esquier remained at Verso's side, a silent, loyal guardian who absorbed the burdens of expectation, family pressure, and the shifting tides of a city at war with itself. For Verso, Esquier was more than a toy. He was a confidant, a source of strength, and the one unchanging comfort in a world where even the meaning of art was up for debate. Art was not limited to painting in the Dessendre household. It was woven into every aspect of daily life. Eileen played the guitar, Renoir the accordion, Clea the harp, and Verso, from a young age, found joy at the piano, though he also dabbled with the guitar. When he asked for a piano of his own, his parents obliged, placing it in his playroom. It became his sanctuary. Verso fell in love with music, spending hours composing and playing at the keys, his passion for melody quickly surpassing any excitement he felt for painting. But the expectations of the family weighed heavily. Instead of embracing the path his parents had mapped out, Verso found solace in his own creations. He would take the mannequins meant for figure drawing and tear the brush heads off his paintbrushes, then glue them to the tops of the figures' heads. With Esquier by his side, he staged epic battles between his makeshift warriors, disposing of the defeated in jars so that only the bristle-topped heads remained visible, a collection that soon dotted every shelf and corner of his room, much to his parents' dismay. Each time Verso gazed at his growing army of wooden figures, he felt the tension between his own desires and the unyielding duty of being a Dessendre. His parents, especially, reminded him to emulate Clea, to focus on painting, and to let go of his musical ambitions, telling him, with brutal honesty, that he would never become a good musician. Through it all, Esquier remained his steadfast companion, and Clea, too, offered comfort, especially when the relentless weight of expectation threatened to crush his creative spirit. At last, faced with mounting pressure, Verso searched his room, the canvases, the jars, the figures, the instruments, and found a compromise. He would do as his parents wished. He would create a canvas world of his own. But in that canvas, he would fill the world with everything he loved: music, play, invention, and all the creatures of his imagination, bringing them to life. With brush in hand, Verso began to paint, not to appease the legacy of the Dessendre name, but to carve out a place for himself within it. Once inside the canvas, Verso set about painting a world that reflected all the joys and comforts of his childhood. He filled the landscape with candy-colored vistas and whimsical playsets, a water resort, tranquil ponds, and a carnival area alive with possibility. His first priority was to bring his best friend, Esquier, to life. Verso worked tirelessly, sculpting and sketching countless versions of Esquier. The remnants of these early attempts still drift across the first layer of the canvas, silent witnesses to the struggle of creation. Turning next to the wooden figures he had fashioned in the real world, Verso breathed life into them as well. Still works in progress in his eyes, these beings glowed with an ethereal spattering of paint, their unfinished nature made visible. For now, he called them half-baked gestrels. Into these new companions, Verso poured the same love of spectacle and drama he remembered from the wrestlers at the Fête Foraine. Battles became a daily event among the half-baked gestrels, followed by healing and camaraderie in the chroma-filled waters of the resort and ponds he had crafted. Some of the gestrels grew bold, challenging not only Verso, but Esquier as well. Esquier, the most powerful of Verso's creations, accepted these challenges with innocent enthusiasm, but not knowing his own strength, he would sometimes vaporize his opponents into paint dust. Verso, unwilling to see his creations harmed, devised a solution. He granted the half-baked gestrels the ability to go full brush mode. This gift manifested in various ways: increased strength, sometimes even dramatic changes in size, but always allowed them to withstand Esquier's power to a degree and walk away without lasting injury. Any wounds that did occur could be mended in the healing waters of Verso's world. For days, Verso came and went between reality and his painted refuge, building up his courage until at last he was ready to share it with someone who mattered most: his sister, Clea. He approached her, asking if she would visit his world and see the creations that meant so much to him. Clea, ready for a respite from her own relentless pursuit of perfection, agreed. Inside the canvas, Clea was greeted by Verso's kaleidoscopic landscape. She spent hours running alongside Verso and Esquier, playing among the half-baked gestrels and exploring every corner of his brother's imagination. Together, the siblings built a treehouse, a sanctuary where they could relax, paint, and play music, far from the expectations and pressures of the real world. These escapes into the canvas with Clea became cherished rituals, a secret world they shared as a refuge. But time, as always, moved on. As Clea matured, she became ever more focused on her work. Yet, she never entirely let go of those moments of play. Even as her responsibilities grew, she would return to Verso's world when she could, the bonds between brother and sister a quiet constant. Each supporting the other, painting their hopes into the fabric of a world only they could fully understand. Sometime in the year 1889, Alicia Dessendre was born, completing the Dessendre family. Verso, filled with excitement at the arrival of his new sister, quickly took to his role as an older brother. He would visit Alicia's room, bringing stories of his adventures with Esquier, eager to share the wonders of this world. When Alicia was upset or restless, Verso would hold up Esquier and in a gentle voice recite a poem to soothe her. When the world is far too blue, listen to the wheeze and the woos. The wheeze go up to touch the sky, laughing loud and flying high. The woos stay low and like to frown, heavy steps that weigh us down. But match them even, side by side, and on the middle, joy will ride. This addition became a thread between them, a ritual Verso maintained even as Alicia grew older, a song of comfort in a world growing more complicated with each passing year. Eventually, Verso shared his new canvas world with his parents. They took note, pleased that he finally embraced his legacy and created a canvas of his own. Eileen and Renoir would visit from time to time, joining in for birthdays or brief moments of familial joy. Yet their approval was always conditional. They continued to push Verso to create, to hone his skill as a painter, not only for the sake of tradition, but as preparation for the looming war between writers and painters that threatened to reshape Paris. Verso's passion for music was dismissed, his desire to become a musician downplayed as a childish distraction from the more important work from becoming a great artist. Retreating to his canvas, Verso sought solitude and self-expression. He painted a massive mountain, carving a face into it reminiscent of Esquier, and separated it from the mainland so that it could only be reached by one of his flying trains. Inside, he let his anger, sadness, and self-doubt pour into the mountain, creating a space he called the root of all evil. At the end of a dark field, he built a hot spring surrounded by flamboyant statues and flames, a place where he could confront his own darkness. It was here that Verso gave form to his pain. He created Oschio, a being who personified all his negative emotions, modeled after his favorite villainous wrestlers from the Fête Foraine. As in the real world, Esquier remained by his side. Together, they would summon Oschio and challenge him to battle. Oschio would taunt Verso, telling him he would never be a good musician. But with Esquier's support, they would defeat him, and Esquier would help Verso find comfort and composure in the aftermath. Despite the pressure around him, Verso clung to his love for music and continued to share stories with Alicia, telling her tales of himself, Esquier, Oschio, and the half-baked Gestrels. But as the war between the writers and painters intensified, it began to seep into the Dessendre household. Clea, already under pressure, took on even more responsibility, hardening herself, becoming more blunt, callous, and driven by a sense of self-importance. Yet, even as she changed, her love for Verso did not fade. One day, while Clea was working on her painting, Verso approached her and asked if she would help him evolve the canvas, now seeing it as much as hers as his. Clea agreed, likely suggesting they mature their creation, moving beyond childish wonders to build a vast living world. Verso agreed, and together, brother and sister entered the canvas to create anew. Together, Verso and Clea stepped into the canvas and began to shape a world that was both reflection and refuge. Esquier was at their side as they painted vast, vivid forests, snow-capped mountains, and rolling plains, a surreal and vibrant landscape, all anchored on a sprawling continent. While Clea helped Verso construct the features of the land, she entrusted the creation of life to him. Verso knew immediately who should come first. With practiced strokes, he set about bringing his half-baked Gestrels into this new world, but with careful changes. These Gestrels were now less ethereal, their forms more solid and wooden, adorned with unique patterns and smatterings of paint. While they did not become geniuses overnight, Verso gave them a spark of ingenuity and the ability to invent, craft, and solve problems, just enough to keep them evolving. He preserved their stubborn fighting spirit, their love of going full brush mode, and their merchant fondness for barter and trade. Yet, there was something deeper Verso wanted to give them, something he himself had never been granted, the possibility of renewal. Drawing inspiration from the life and loss of the family dog Monoko, whose passing had been followed by the arrival of Monoko II, a new dog with the same name and look but a different soul. Verso endowed the Gestrels with the gift of reincarnation. Cousins, same but different, as Esquier would later put it. To make this cycle possible, Verso imagined and painted the sacred river, a central source for the flow of chroma and rebirth. Gestrels lived long lives, their age marked by their height, some reaching 20 or 30 feet tall. In the end, they would stiffen, striking the same pose Verso once gave his childhood figures during their playroom battles, and became planted in the earth. Their chroma returned to the sacred river, and in time, Each would emerge anew, reborn as a child with fewer memories, given another chance to experience a different life. But as the conflict between writers and painters escalated and spilled into violence, Verso's attention turned to the world of adults. Remembering how grown-ups in his childhood settled disputes with rhyme, verse, and metaphor, he created a new being. Massive, troll-like creatures with gray hair and bodies of living stone, the Grandis. Unlike the combative Gestrels, the Grandis were intellectual, gentle, and innately skilled at building, especially with stone. They had little taste for violence, preferring to resolve their differences through poetry and debate. Verso spent those years adventuring with Clea, Esquier, and Minoko, the white-haired Gestrel he had modeled after his loyal dog. On the worst days, when the pressures of the real world became too much, Verso would retreat to the old layer of the canvas to battle Ascio, confronting his darkness in the only way he knew how. But time, as always, presses forward. As Verso and Clea entered their teens, the war raging outside the canvas began to change them. Priorities shifted, childhood innocence faded, and the real world became a place of evolving responsibilities and hard-earned wisdom. As the years passed, Verso and Alicia grew close, their bond forged in quiet spaces left by their parents and Clea's towering expectations. Verso discovered Alicia's passion for books, poetry, and the written word, a love he respected and understood. Both siblings knew what it felt like to live in the shadow of a family legacy that held no interest for their true selves. They became confidants. Verso, the musician in a painter's house, Alicia, the writer in a world that demanded color, not words. Verso's own love of water blossomed as he matured. He became captain of his school's swim team, finding freedom and accomplishment in the pool. When he returned to the canvas, he found he no longer needed Ascio as an outlet. He had learned to cope with his parents' disappointments. Instead, he challenged the half-baked Gestrels to swimming races, sometimes even beating them, though no matter how hard he tried, he could never outswim Esquier. Clea remained a presence in his adventures, joining him whenever she could to expand and enrich the canvas world. She established workshops throughout the landscape, fostering invention and design, but her most ambitious creation was the Endless Tower. Inside, Clea engineered the early prototypes of what would later become the Nevrons, and together, she and Verso would battle through the tower's countless floors, sharpening their combat skills. They named this challenge the Gauntlet, a test of endurance and creativity. They tried to include Alicia in their adventures, but she often declined, preferring to lose herself in stories written rather than painted. While Clea, outspoken and passionate, would voice her opinions about the escalating conflict between writers and painters, Verso would be there to comfort Alicia afterwards, always her stalwart protector. Time pressed on. By her mid-20s, Clea and Verso had grown into their roles as creators and siblings, while Alicia, now 16, continued to seek solace in literature. Again, the lore does not tell us a lot about the conflict, but by using real-world events, we can begin to speculate possibilities. In the real Paris of the 1890s, writers held institutional power, controlling both the press and the art academies, dictating what was allowed to exist on canvas. In the game, this could translate to how the written word of the writers was law. Scripts, rules, and objective descriptions locked reality into a predictable state. Painters, by contrast, wielded chroma, the magic to break those rules. Through expressive color and magic, they bent reality. This can be seen with the floating canvases and the Dessendre atelier itself. By 1905, the struggle between the writers and painters had erupted into open warfare. The painter's ability to alter not just the canvas was seen as an existential threat by the writers, who launched a desperate campaign to eliminate both the painters and their painted dimensions. For the writers, literal truth was sacred. For the painters, reality was a medium to be transformed. The clash was inevitable. Unable to fight the painter's chroma directly, the writers turned to subterfuge. If magic could not be defeated by force, then it would be undone from within, by targeting those closest to the head of the painter's council, and by exploiting the very family bonds that had once made the Dessendres strong. The game does not reveal the precise nature of how the writers manipulated Alicia, but it is clear she was involved in the tragedy that befell the manor, and that her actions were shaped by forces beyond her own intent. Based on everything we know, there are two possibilities that stand out as both plausible and thematically consistent. The first is that the writers, much like the painters, could also possess powers of their own. Through the written word, they may have been able to exert influence, to compel, and manipulate others toward their ends. It is conceivable that they provided Alicia with a letter, a script of sorts, that, once read or followed, led her to unwittingly start the fire that would consume her family's home. But there is another explanation. one that resonates more deeply with the patterns of disappointment and alienation that haunted the Dessendre children. Just as Verso had been chastised for his passion for music, Alicia too likely endured countless admonishment for her devotion to writing and poetry. Verso's comfort, though well-meaning, could not fill the void left by a family at war with itself. The writers, ever watchful, likely tracked the Dessendre family, seeking any fracture to exploit, especially with Eileen holding the position of head of the Painters' Council. It is easy to imagine Alicia, desperate for acceptance and understanding, sneaking away to listen to poets and learn from the writers who shared her passion. Over time, operatives within the writers' ranks may have found her, offering validation and a sense of belonging she could not find at home. Perhaps they convinced her siding with them would end the conflict, that her mother could be persuaded to abandon the fight and bring peace at last. The confrontation came to a head on December 33, 1905. Words were exchanged between mother and daughter, words that cut deep, that could never be taken back. Overwhelmed with emotion, Alicia returned to her adjoining room, surrounded by the books, poetry, and typewriter that had become her sanctuary. In a fit of rage and hopelessness, she set out to burn it all, perhaps hoping to exorcise the pain, perhaps simply wanting to destroy the part of herself that could never be reconciled with her family's demands. The fire spread faster than she could have imagined. Alicia became trapped, flames licking at the walls as smoke filled her lungs. Verso, hearing her screams, rushed in without hesitation. He did what he could to smother the flames, pulling his sister from the inferno. Her body was severely burned, but he carried her toward the door, searching for a way out. Trapped and surrounded, Verso likely tossed Alicia through the flames to safety, sacrificing his own escape. In the final moments, as the fire grew too great, Verso simply turned to his sister, smiled through the agony, and told her she would be okay. The flames consumed him in the room, and with that, Verso Dessendre was gone. But his story did not end here. In the world he had created, and in the echo of his soul left behind, Verso would endure. His suffering, his love, and his hope for something better, woven forever into the fabric of the canvas. When painters use their chroma to create a canvas world, they must first surrender a piece of their soul, binding it to the very fabric of the reality they shape. That fragment of self becomes the heart of the canvas, the source of its life and continuity. Verso was only 7 or 8 years old when he first gave up that piece, so the version of himself that endured within the canvas was a child's soul, shaped by innocence, longing, and the burdens he bore. Yet this child was not cut off from his adult self. He retained his memories, his knowledge of what he had lost, and the painful awareness that he no longer existed in the world beyond the canvas. Trapped as a child's soul, Verso resigned himself to his role, painting endlessly to provide the chroma that kept his and Clea's world alive. He projected himself across the canvas, a quiet observer, watching the creatures he had made living out the joys and adventures he could no longer share. Time in the canvas moved with a terrible indifference. As we have discussed before, 22.33 canvas years passed for every single day in the real world. In the months after his death, while Eileen tended to Alicia, before the weight of loss and resentment set in, over 1,000 years swept by in the painted world. During this time, Verso's soul, no longer fueled by his living form, began to fade. The painter's soul is not infinite, chroma runs dry, and without renewal, the world itself would eventually become just another painting, empty, still, and dead. Verso struggled, holding the world together with what little of himself remained. His identity beginning to blur, the details of who he was slipping away with every stroke of the brush and every year that passed. But then, something changed. Eileen, unable to endure her grief, entered the canvas and found Verso still alive in the echo of his creation. She spent time with him, listening to him play piano, encouraging the music she had once dismissed, trying to offer the love she realized she should have given all along. These visits became a reprieve for both, a chance to reclaim lost time, if only in the half-light of memory and paint. Eileen came and went, but eventually, her desires to be with her son outweighed her ties to the real world. She created the city of Lumiere, crafting her own versions of humanity to fill the city with life and surround herself and Verso with a semblance of family and normalcy. Verso admired her work, recognizing the care and detail poured into every street and every face. Yet, as days became years in the canvas, Eileen saw that none of it was enough. For all her efforts, Verso remained a faceless shadow of her son, his identity slipping away with every passing day. Desperate for peace, Eileen prepared to do the only thing she believed might change their fate. One final act to bridge the gulf between love, regret, and the relentless passage of time. After thousands of canvas years, Eileen returned to her son's world with a resolve that would change everything. This time, she chose to abandon the real world entirely, resigning herself to live out her days inside the canvas. She undertook the unthinkable. Using all of her gifts and talents, she painted copies of Renoir, Clea, Alicia, and Verso himself. Each was imbued with their memories, feelings, and thoughts, though each bore physical alterations reflecting Eileen's own perceptions and desires. When it came to Verso, she went further, binding the very essence of his soul to his painted double, so that they might share a life together. But this bond was a double-edged sword. It allowed them to experience moments of connection, but also chained Painted Verso's being to every pain, every heartbreak, and every loss endured by his real self. For a time, they lived with Eileen in a fragile peace, a family constructed from longing and memory. Verso, understanding what his mother needed to process her grief, continued to paint and to suffer in silence, enduring endless years for her sake. Harmony, however, cannot last in a world built on denial. One day, Renoir entered the canvas. He saw what his wife had become, how the days spent inside had made her ill, how she was slowly dying to keep the illusion alive. Determined to save her, as she had once saved him, Renoir resolved to help Eileen move on from their son's death and escape the prison of fantasy she had built. Verso could only watch, powerless, as his parents' love curdled into conflict, the argument circling always around his absence. Guilt and resentment grew in him, knowing he existed now only as the cause of this unending rift. Words turned to violence. What followed shocked even Verso. The collision of their chromas erupted with such a fury that the world he and Clea had built together was torn apart in an instant. This catastrophe became known as the Fracture. The aftermath was devastation. The continent itself was shattered and scattered to the winds. Lumiere, the city Eileen had poured her essence into, was broken, half cast adrift into the sea. The creations Verso loved, the Gestrals and Grandis, were decimated, their populations reduced to a mere fraction of what they had been, scattered and lost. In the ruins, a monolith rose, trapping Eileen at its summit and Renoir at its base. Silent sentinels to a family destroyed by its own longing. But for Verso, the fracture was only the beginning. The world he had painted became a landscape of loss and torment. The depth of his suffering had only just begun. Not long after, Verso's sister Clea, noticing their father's absence from the war raging in the real world, entered the canvas in search of Renoir. What she found inside changed everything. Clea was struck by a surge of emotion as she beheld the giant monolith, looming over what she and Verso had once created together, and felt the presence of her mother and father trapped at its opposite ends. Grief, anger, and resentment welled up inside her. She had lost the last remnants of her brother, now ruined by the very people who should have done everything to protect this memory. In response, Clea returned to her workshops and began to create. The deadly creatures that would become known as the Nevrons were born from her hands, a calculated weapon unleashed upon the canvas. She sent them out to hunt and kill Eileen's human creations, trapping their chroma, denying her mother any hope of restoration, and aiding Renoir's efforts to erase the canvas altogether. For a full breakdown of Clea's motivations, see the dedicated video in this series, but of course, finish this one first. Verso, forced to witness the violence and destruction unleashed by his sister, no doubt sought her out at some point. But by then, having existed as a soul in the canvas for over 100,000 canvas years, Verso was fading, his physical form deteriorating, his memory slipping away. When he did appear to Clea, he was only a shadow of the brother she had once known, able to speak only in broken fragments, lost thoughts, and scattered recollections. Clea's feelings towards him were tangled and unresolved. She likely pitied the last piece of her brother, trapped in endless existence by the delusions of their mother. She may have hated him for sacrificing himself to save Alicia, the sibling to whom she was never as close. Yet, she also loved him for that same act. Clea's motivation wore a storm of love, jealousy, resentment, and grief, shaped by years of being overshadowed, by her parents' obsession with a son who was gone, and by their neglect of their living daughters. Driven by these conflicting emotions, Clea did something both purposeful and cruel. In the darkness at the heart of the canvas, she established a hidden workshop, deep within the moments of Verso's rest. There, she created her masterpiece, the Lamp Master. This creature was engineered to haunt Verso's dreams, to exhaust and weaken him, and to prevent him from fighting back against the Nevrons. Clea's plan was not merely born of anger, she acted with intent. By draining Verso's strength, she would hasten the fading of his soul, ensuring the canvas would finally collapse and that her brother could at last find rest. For the next 67 years, Verso's memories unraveled at an ever-quickening pace. He forgot why he had created the world, lost the thread of names, events, and even the memory of his own death at times. He watched as Clea painted over her mother's copy of herself, turning her into a machine that ceaselessly churned out nevrons. Occasionally, Verso would visit his mother inside the monolith. She, in her moments of lucidity, would gift him a train, allowing him to ride through the distorted versions of the canvas world within the monolith's walls. Decay became the only constant. Verso's feelings about his purpose, about the need to keep painting, to keep the world alive, grew ever more conflicted. His existence became a cycle of fading, suffering, and the quiet, desperate hope for release. Everything would change when Monolith Year 33 began, setting into motion a chain of events that would alter the fate of the canvas and Verso forever. When Expedition 33 set out, they would encounter Verso at intervals throughout their journey. To the expeditioners, his words were a puzzle, fragments of memory and longing, spoken with the confusion of a soul who had endured too many centuries alone. Sometimes, he spoke of his love for the canvas, of his belief that its inhabitants, including even Eileen's painted humans, were real to him, worthy of the life that was poured into them. Other times, Verso's exhaustion was palpable. He would question whether it was worth suffering any longer to keep the canvas alive, all the while knowing that he was complicit in sustaining the illusions that let his mother and sister hide from reality, living out their days until death claimed them inside the painted world. The expeditioners could not truly understand the depth of what he was saying, but there was one among them who did. Painted Verso, Verso's own counterpart, had spent decades working to free their mother from the canvas, hoping that by helping her move on, he could save both her and Verso, granting them the peace they deserved. Painted Verso's methods were often extreme, even murderous in their intent to erase, to end the cycle of suffering. But Verso himself was powerless to intervene, left only to endure whatever choices were made. In time, their efforts bore fruit. Eileen was expelled from the canvas, and Renoir was released from beneath the monolith. Renoir then erased all of Eileen's creations, with the exception of Alicia, who awakened fully to her painter's powers and became whole once more. Their task seemed finished, but as Renoir began to erase Painted Verso, Alicia intervened, saving him, and also managing to preserve the essence of Ciel and Lune, escaping Lumiere as Renoir continued his relentless work of erasure. Eventually, they gathered at the remnants of Lumiere to confront Renoir himself. In the end, they defeated him. He relented, returning to the real world, and left Alicia with the choice of whether to stay in the canvas. During these events, Painted Verso had seen his mother suffering in reality and could no longer bear it. He leapt through the portal Renoir had opened and found himself at the heart of the canvas, where Verso sat, a child's soul, endlessly painting. As Painted Verso approached, he asked Verso if he was tired of painting. Verso hesitated and thought on it for only a moment, then nodded. Painted Verso, too, admitted his weariness. It was a moment of recognition, a shared exhaustion that only they could understand. Alicia then intervened, striking her sword between them, as Verso, resigned, prepared to leave. At this point, the player faced the ultimate choice, to fight as Alicia or as Painted Verso. The two endings have been debated at length. If the player fights as Alicia, Painted Verso fades from existence, begging Alicia for release from this endless life. She doesn't grant it, instead, allowing him to have a mortal life and versions of the others, to remain in the canvas until Alicia herself presumably dies in the real world. If the player chooses Painted Verso, Alicia begs him not to erase the canvas, but he assures her she will be okay in reality as she fades. The others eventually fade as well, and Painted Verso takes Verso's hand. The two walk away together, finally allowed to rest, their family able to grieve as a family, whole and together, at last. It is these endings that split the community, sparking debate over which resolution is the right one. But what most overlook, what the game so skillfully conceals, is that only one choice truly matters, and it was never about Painted Verso, Alicia, or anyone else. The real main character, the one whose suffering was at the very heart of the canvas, was Verso himself. All the rest was only ever a shadow of his story. Now we come to the heart of why Verso's ending is the right one, but not in the way most players expect. Painted Verso is not a hero, nor is he blameless. He committed underhanded and at times genuinely cruel acts, justifying them for selfish reasons. Yet it's vital to remember, Painted Verso too was connected to the original soul fragment. He could feel the true Verso's endless exhaustion and anguish. Even as he sought to end his own suffering, some part of him earnestly wanted to help the real Verso finally rest. This sentiment is clearest in Alicia's ending.
Alicia, I beg you. Stop him from painting.
Don't say that. Please, don't say that.
Please, listen to me. Only you can do this. You can do this, please. Unpaint me. Unpaint me.
So,
Please. I don't want this life.
stop saying
I
that.
don't want this life. I don't want this life.
I just wanted to live this lifetime together. This lifetime that was stolen from us. Please, bro. Please.
I don't want this life. Help me. Help me.
As Painted Verso begs with every breath, he repeats the words, "I don't want this life," with unrelenting resolve. The game then cuts to Verso, looking back at Painted Verso, his body expression etched with longing, as Painted Verso starts whispering, "Help me, help me," as if finally allowing himself to speak through his painted counterpart. Even before the final plea, Painted Verso reaches for Verso, silently asking Alicia to stop him from painting, to end the suffering that he can feel in every fiber of his being. Many players argue that Alicia's ending is the moral choice, that sparing the canvas is the only way to avoid mass murder, to preserve the lives of beings who, by every measure, are as real as anyone in the waking world. And they are right. Verso, the faceless boy, does love his creations. He considers them real, and their loss is a true loss. But there is a tragic irony here that is too often missed. By the time you are asked to make the final choice, Lumiere is already gone. Its people, its living, breathing souls, are already dead. The only souls left are Ciel, Lune, Esquier, and Minoko. When Painted Verso reaches out and asks the child if he's ready to finally stop, the boy nods. He chooses to let go. To insist on Alicia's ending, to preserve this world at any cost, is not heroic. It is an act of attachment, a refusal to allow a suffering soul to rest, forcing him to maintain an artificial, hollow playground for eternity, simply because we cannot bear to let go of what we have already lost. The world is doomed to fade, whether with the end of Verso's soul or when Alicia herself finally dies. She is repeating the cycle that her mother had already begun. Yes, you save the 4 characters you've grown attached to, but you doom all those who would come after, as they too will vanish when the last tether fades. Even those returned, Gustave, Sophie, Ciel's husband, are not truly themselves. They are, like the Painted Dessendres, living copies imbued with the memories Alicia has chosen to give them. If you listen closely to the scene, where Painted Verso helps Alicia retrieve Ciel and Lune, you'll find my justification.
Painting isn't about verisimilitude, it's about essence. Truth of who they are. Your father made the axles, right?
She who plays with wonder, he who guards truth with lies.
They're the essence of your mother and your brother.
Painted Verso is explicit. To bring them back, Alicia must remember the essence of who they truly are. She paints them back using the literal essence, the chroma she saved from Lumiere before they left. She cannot do the same for everyone else. Those she tries to recover are born purely from memory and raw chroma, not from the living spark of their true selves. To the people who say Alicia saves everyone because she repaints Lumiere at the end, look closer at the final scene. That isn't a happy reunion. It's a lovely tragedy. Painted Verso explicitly begged her not to bring him back into a false life. He wanted to rest, but Alicia denies him and her real brother's soul freedom. When the elderly Painted Verso sits at the piano, the game shows pure disdain and exhaustion on his face. He is a hostage. Look at Alicia's eyes. They are shown covered with chroma sickness. She didn't save Lumiere. She became her mother. She trapped herself in a dying simulation, forcing the clone of her dead brother to perform for her, all while her real body rots in the real world. Siding with Alicia doesn't beat the countdown. It just turns the canvas into an eternal, beautifully painted prison. In the end, the world that so many players fight to save is already gone. The only thing left is Verso's suffering, stretched across centuries, maintained from the comfort of everyone but himself. The right ending is not the one that preserves the illusion of life. It's the one that finally sets a suffering soul free and allows the true Verso to rest. Then there are those who defend choosing Painted Verso's choice to end the canvas once and for all. But they frame it wrong and focus on Painted Verso himself and his suffering and helping the Dessendre family move on, but it's actually not that cut and dry. Let's stop pretending Painted Verso is a hero. He isn't trying to save the day. He is a tired clone running on the borrowed time of a dying engine, desperate to pull the plug. Siding with him to activate the Gommage isn't a heroic choice. It's a grim, necessary execution of a broken world. The real target of mercy here is Verso's soul, trapped endlessly painting. For generations, this piece of Verso's innocence has been mechanically exploited to anchor Lumiere, while Aline's real-world body slowly rots. Keeping the canvas alive under Alicia's choice isn't a happy ending. It is another fantasy. It forces that childhood fragment to keep painting a doomed, unsustainable lie until Alicia finally dies, and the world violently snaps out of existence anyway. Ending the canvas is simply the right thing to do. It isn't heroic. It's just finally allowing a stolen piece of a dead man's soul to put down the brush, step away from the canvas, and rest. The bottom line is this: both Alicia's and Painted Verso's choices are ultimately projections of us, the player, each revealing how we attach ourselves to the lives and illusions inside this magical world. I chose Alicia's ending the first time, and like so many, I clung to the hope of saving the canvas, of preserving something beautiful in the face of loss. But the more I played, the more I wrestled with both choices, the more I began to understand the truth at the heart of Expedition 33. Painted Verso and Alicia are both selfish, and our choices, whether to save the canvas or set it free, are reflections of our own unwillingness to let go. We want the world to endure, or we want relief from suffering, but in the end, it's not about us. The real decision had already been made, and it was the only one that truly mattered. The request of the soul still struggling to hold the canvas together with what little remained of his identity. When Painted Verso looked at Verso and asked, "Are you ready to stop painting?" Verso nodded, reached for his hand, and said yes. In that moment, no other choice mattered. After a lifetime of suffering, from the disappointments of childhood to the agony of the fire, to the endless centuries of fading within the canvas, Verso had endured more than enough. His wish was simple: to rest. Not Alicia's desire to write her life in the canvas, not Painted Verso's longing for self-relief, but Verso's own will to let go. No one has the right to take that away from him. In the end, you have to respect Verso's choice. It's his life, or what's left of it, and after everything, he chose to suffer no longer. It is the only right ending. Anything else is just another illusion, an act of selfishness, and any other delay of the peace Verso so deeply deserved. Most players walked away from Expedition 33 believing they had just witnessed a beautiful, tragic choice about saving a dying world, We cried for Alicia, we debated her ending, and we treated Painted Verso like a tragic hero, longing for release and to help his family move on. But we were completely wrong. The game pulled off an amazing narrative trick in my opinion, forcing us to focus on the wrong characters while completely ignoring the one entity trapped in actual, unmitigated suffering. This story was never about saving humanity. It was an intimate, heartbreaking hostage situation. And that's why I believe that the real Verso's soul desperately needed us to pull the plug. And so, the story of Verso Dessendre comes to a close, not as a legend of triumph, but as a quiet, aching plea for peace after a lifetime of burdens. In the end, the canvas was never meant to last forever. It is Verso's choice, the choice to rest, to finally let go, that matters most. To honor his story is to honor the truth that all worlds, no matter how magical or tragic, must one day find their end. With this, we are wrapping up our exploration of Expedition 33's lore, but the journey isn't finished quite yet. In our upcoming 2-part series, we'll turn our focus to the fate of the other expeditions. Those who set out into the unknown, vanished into legend, and left behind mysteries that have haunted the canvas since the fracture. If this story has resonated with you, or if you have your own theories or questions, let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the final 2 videos in the series. My name is Vigil, and this has been Video Game Lore, and I'll see you in the next one.